Celtic Stuff Live.
Welcome to Celtic Stuff Live on CLNS Media Network, the leading online provider of audio and video coverage for the Boston Celtics. I'm your host, Justin Poulin. Joining me is John Duke, and I'll tell you what, Paul Pierce, he's back. And on the day of days, John, 71717, our man number 34, 17 plus 17 equals 34, he signs. And we don't know how long he's hanging around for. Is he just going to retire by the time this broadcast or this podcast airs on Tuesday morning? Or is he going to be sticking around for a little while? They don't have to make roster, cuts, camp cuts until the very end. Right. Would be awesome to see them. And we've talked about this before. This isn't the first time we've raised it. Would be so awesome to see Paul Pierce play in the final preseason game or something along those lines before they wind up letting him retire, making their final roster decisions and moving in to the 2017-2018 season. I'd absolutely love it. I want to see him on the floor again. I know we enjoyed his last moments and Doc's giving him the opportunity to hit that three-pointer and everybody sagging off defensively, but it would really be awesome to see him play like more minutes than that in sort of an exposition farewell.
Well, yeah, and that's where, first of all, going out the way he did last season was amazing, right? You can't top that. There's a strong sentiment in my heart to say, let's not touch that, right? Let's leave him right where he is. He went out on a good note. Let's go with it.
Yeah, you just can't recreate that magic.
You can't. I would hate to run in the way of that, which could happen if they did something like that. Having said that, though, being able to bring him into training camp, have him work with the guys, not have him go through all the drills, have him be on there as an honorary player or what have you. I think it's less likely in part because he's not a Brad Stevens guy. Not that Brad would be against it, but there's going to be a lot of moving pieces. We got max contract guy coming in. We got in HAYWARD. We got all these rookies coming in. Maybe if Brad Stevens were Doc, I don't think there's any question in the world it happens.
Mm-hmm.
But
there's
Doc,
no tie there. You're right. There's really there's respect and there's appreciation for the Boston Celtics brand and history and all the reasons we love Brad for just embracing that and then bringing somebody like Gordon Hayward into the fold to become part of that. But you're correct. Paul Pierce is 100% Doc Rivers guy. And maybe that's why the way it went down last year was perfect. And maybe that's why, even though everybody still crapped all over Doc, and I remember it was like Paul Pierce's moment, but everybody took the opportunity to rail on Doc, didn't they, John? And I was,
some more than others.
Some more than others. That's exactly. But you have to admit there's something perfect about that. But I still want to roll the dice. I want to see him. I want to see him play his last minutes in a Celtics uniform, not in a Clippers uniform in the Garden. As perfect as that would be even better to give him the opportunity to write his own script in green, not just retire because he signed a contract. They've got his jersey laid right out there, and I love how Wick just, hey, look. The first time they're asked if they're retiring Paul Pierce's number, we can't wait to put this one in the rafters. This comes on the heels of giving Gordon Hayward number 20. Eat that, Ray Allen. That's all I have to say. That number is never going up in the rafters with Ray Allen's name on it. I really hope that it'll have Gordon Hayward's name on it.
Yeah, that would be nice. That would be nice. I think that there is something to it, though. Okay, since you got your numerology thing out of the way, I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on right now.
All right, perfect.
So look, usually when they do this thing, you sign, you have the press conference, Wick's there, Pags is there, you've got Danny's there, everyone sits down, Paul signs it in front of everybody, he holds up the jersey. it just seemed a little weird that he signed this with like virtually nobody in the gym.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
It like usually they would have made a bigger deal out of this. So it makes you wonder, is there a second part to this that we don't know about? Is there a second part to this signing as a Celtic and then retiring that we don't know about? Which kind of lends credence to what you were saying. Maybe they are going to keep him on the roster for a little while.
Maybe he's part of the new training staff.
It's possible.
Maybe he's on the new training staff. No, I think we all have him, Paul Pierce is earmarked for, like I always snuck that in there.
He's a hard worker.
He was
a hard worker.
You got to give him that. The dude worked out like crazy. He was definitely one of the gym rats on the team. I think everybody's got him earmarked for going and doing broadcasting, following in the post-playing footsteps of Doc Rivers before possibly becoming a coach or, taking some sort of a front office position. The Celtics have talked about Paul coming back and having some sort of involvement in the organization, so you can definitely see it happening at some point. But I definitely also think that Paul is probably not going to wind up being with the organization this year. I think it will happen in the future. Look at Walter McCarty, right? He's coaching Summer League. He found a spot. It just depends, and I think every organization is smart this way. You don't just pull somebody right out of their playing days into coaching because they won't be able to make the separation. You have to have some distance and realization that you can't play anymore to be effective in any kind of coaching capacity. I mean, he could go do some PR, he could go do other roles in the organization, but he won't make as much money as he will as an analyst. He's already established himself.
That's the thing, and you nailed it. It's all about the money, man. Follow the money, right? That's what it's all about. And he's going to make bank playing for ESPN. He's not going to make anything coming here. It's assistant coach, assistant general manager, none of that. Like while we all have a fantasy of seeing him come, work for the team, do the whole thing, it's not going to happen. I would love it, but the fact is, it's just not going to work because he's going to make way too much money working for ESPN. He's good at it. He's going to be on their number one, studio crew next year. I think he's got a long career on that end of it. So we'll see what happens. But I loved it.
Yeah, I did too. And, Paul Pierce is our boy, right? If you really look at our generation, we were on the heels of Larry Bird and we grew up, but if you really look at the age comparison, he's a little bit younger than me. I think he's probably pretty close to the same age as you, John. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Where I think that you
Year
fall
older.
pretty almost, year older. So when we were young men, going into our professional lives, that's
right.
when, Paul Pierce had his heyday. And it's probably when we really began to understand the game much better. It's really the heyday of this show. Paul Pierce was the only good player on the team pretty much at that point. Like, they traded, when we got started, Antoine Walker, we might have been doing the show a little bit before that, but Antoine Walker got moved to the Mavericks. Mm-hmm. The deconstruction began, and we were some of the very few people that had Danny Ainge's back. He was getting blasted all over the place for trying to reconstruct that roster. And our show was almost like the island in all of that negativity where we said, no, you've got to do something more drastic if you're going to get anywhere with this team. And we were all about the young players playing. And Paul was still young then, and he was leading this organization. He was the guy that we were counting on. And for a brief moment there, it looked like he might be out of town for Chris Paul. And imagine if that had happened. That would have changed everything. There would be no KG number 5. There might have been a banner 17 somewhere along the way in there, but I don't think it would have been the same. Having an iconic Celtic like Paul Pierce, who started here, survived just about every single other player that was here when he was drafted and along the way being gone, the only staying player during all of that duration, and then to get that championship. Mm-hmm. And that was obviously an amazing run for us, just covering it at the time and how enjoyable that was. But Paul Pierce will always be my favorite player for that reason. I know him the best.
Paul Pierce was amazing. He fought life and death battles here as a Celtic. And his legacy. You know, it's funny. There was a Twitter a tweet, I suppose, that was sent out. The NBA put together the top 34 highlights of Paul Pierce's career. And, you know, when they do it for Bird, it's like, that's great because it's Bird and he's got all these highlights or whatever. But it seems like those 34 highlights never stand up to how good a player Paul Pierce was. You know, he just wasn't that guy. And it's not a disrespect thing at all in my mind. It's just that his value was so much greater than just a big highlight or a big dunk or, you know, the big shot. You know, it just feels like it was a constant barrage of, if they put the ball in his hands at the end of the game, your team is going to win. You know, it didn't always happen. I mean, it just, you know, that's crazy to think it would.
He was just so clutch.
But he was clutch. And, you know, those little clips, they don't accurately depict how important he was, not just as winning individual games or as a great player in individual highlights, but just overall what he meant for this franchise from the day that he was attacked there in the Buzz Club, all the way through his last days, really convincing KG to take the deal and go on to the Brooklyn Nets, which has really set up this second wave or this next wave, I suppose.
Yeah, an incredibly selfless kind of thing right there too, you know, and I think a lot of people could look at it like that was a selfish decision, right? Let's go get another championship. No. Let's go ring chasing. Nothing like what Kevin Durant did, right?
No.
It was, let's do what's right for the organization. You know, see how I had to do that? I had to do that. I'll never not take that shot. I guess, you know, there were so many things as we prepared. Yeah.
Justin Poole and checklist.
Ray Allen.
Check.
Yeah.
KD,
Dog
check.
Rivers, people don't like him.
Yep. Check.
KD.
Check.
You're right.
Bingo. I got bingo. Right. Anyway,
Man.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I had more. I was going off like a rocket right then.
Sorry.
But I will say this, and then maybe we'll talk more about Paul Pierce. I have a hunch that this retirement is going to be delayed. This is not a let's create ratings in the off-season scenario. This is let's set the table and do it effing right. That's what I think is going on. So we're going to talk about this, I believe, throughout the entire off-season. I think we'll have this conversation about what's in store with Paul. They'll probably leak out some things that they intend to do. We'll start to read, you know, the tea leaves. But, you know, everybody starts to go on vacation pretty soon.
Right.
Maybe like right after July 31st as a date that you might throw out there as a date and time that was sort of important to Celtics fans everywhere. But right around August, that's when everybody squeezes in their vacay. And,
speaking of that, that's another important detail in this, is that there's one name of somebody who retired a year earlier who hasn't been given his date in terms of retirement. And I don't know if they'd do 2 for 1. I think they'd stretch it out myself. Are they waiting to do Paul first, then do KG?
They have to do it that way, and KG would respect that too.
Mm-hmm.
The same way that Paul respected the organization and knowing that they couldn't do anymore. And when Danny came to him and said, literally, I have no money I can get to give you guys what you deserve. So this is what I'd like to do. With that in mind, you're kind of in this very, you know, KG has that same respect for the organization that he would recognize that Paul's got to go first. And as big a personality as KG is, he is all about team. But you gotta be in that circle, right? You have to be in that circle. And Paul is in that circle. So here's my question. Like, they'll retire his number, but the Timberwolves haven't retired the number yet either, have they? Or did they retire? So. I don't think they did.
No, I don't think so.
So in that same vein, to your point about timing, would be great if they did a 2 for 1, but you almost think that KG, for the same reasoning that Paul should go up before him, his jersey's probably going to have to go up in Minnesota before it does in Boston too.
I don't know. I don't know if Boston would wait. I don't know.
But
it's a good question.
Doesn't
It's a good
KG have a
question
little
now.
bit of say on that?
I don't know. I feel like it's always something that the team, a decision from the team, and I maybe I'm making something out of nothing here. It seems like there's something here that hasn't happened, and the fact that they didn't do KG's jersey last year when he was clearly retired, clearly wasn't coming back. I don't know. It seems like that they were waiting for something. And the fact that the Celtics, that Paul didn't immediately retire after signing the contract, seems like there's something else that we're all waiting for. We'll see.
Yep,
we'll see.
We will. All right. Well, no better time to take a quick break and do station identification than the obvious end of a discussion, but it will continue. We will talk about Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett a lot more, I guarantee you, between now and September and what's in store. Don't forget to follow Celtic Stuff Live on Twitter at CSL_tweetlive. You can follow me, your host, Justin, at CSL_Justin. John is at CSL_Duke. The entire CLNS Media Network at CLNS Media and the Facebook page, facebook.com/CLNS fans. Download the CLNS Media app for iOS and Android. Simply search CLNS Media in your app marketplace, and the YouTube channel, youtube.com/CLNS Media, for high definition, full length locker room interviews, the Garden Report with Jared Weiss, and the Celtics Roundtable with Sam Sheehan, who obviously listens to the show because the first time we gave him a YouTube shout out, he was all over it on the Twitter. So thanks, Sam. Appreciate the props. And that's going to do it. We'll continue on with more topics. Where do you want to go, John? We've got new rules. We have the whole trainers. We haven't really talked about the Hayward signing becoming official. We need to wrap up Summer League and Jackson being cut and then stretched. Where do you want to go next? You want to go Hayward? We might as well go Hayward.
Let's go Hayward.
Because this is like a
Hayward to go home.
Right? Sign Hayward, sign Paul Pierce, make the handoff. It's kind of interesting that way. And I know that Isaiah Thomas showed mad respect for Paul Pierce as well. So there was kind of a handoff there in that whole final moment, with an asterisk so far, because nothing's been proven yet. But that whole asterisk of a final moment with Paul Pierce on the parquet, there was respect there. But I can't help but feel like there's a little bit of a handoff here.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's the time for a new generation, right? It's time for us to move from title contention of a prior era. I think even up until this point, I think there was a lot of comparisons. It's like, well, what was Paul Pierce doing, versus what IT had done, and how we compare to the Big Three era where they're so good. I think now with the arrival of Gordon Hayward, we have our own era now to talk about. We have the Hayward, Horford, IT era, the HIH, if you will, or the HHI, or the IHH, or the TH. I don't know. Someone else smarter than me is going to figure out something for those three. But that's the era, right? That's where we're at. That's where we're at. It's those three. And the problem is, I think we need to ratchet back, our expectations of Gordon Hayward and the team now. Personally, I think we all you and I are going to get our summer forecast emails probably shortly from Chris Forsberg, who shortly will not want to do work of his own and only wants to collate what we write.
Well, we haven't brought him on since last preseason, so he might forget about us, feeling
like
we forgot about him. He may not be aware that we haven't had a guest on this show since, I think, did we do Gorman and Grandy over the winter and that was it? Maybe we fit in the Spears?
I think that's right.
We've been going solo for the most part. No, we did do a Ryan Bernardoni interview and a Sam Sheehan one as well.
Sure.
But the interviews have become less, and the you and I rambling on have become more. So hopefully Chris will include us again. And Chris, if you're listening, we do want to be included.
We do. We
Please don't leave us out.
Included. Don't hold it against us. Yes. No, it's great. It's great to be a part of that. But the thing about that is there's always the question is what do you think the record's going to be? I don't think the record's going to be as big of a jump from where they were last year, as directly related to how much better they are. So for example, like some would say like, oh, well, they should be 7 wins better because they're going to add an all-star who can do all these things next to IT. I think it's probably only like 3 or 4 wins better. I think they're like 55, 56, maybe 57, mid-50s.
I think they're 58.
But,
I predicted 55 last year.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking this season might finally be the first one when they've been a decent team where they don't falter out of the gate. And I know there's still questions about lineup, and I know everybody wants to go, they're going to struggle. And the only way that happens is if Isaiah Thomas's hip is actually an issue, and he's not coming out of the gate. Because I honestly think having another shooter on the floor really helps a lot of the offensive doldrums that led to that. Like, they suffered a much decreased effectiveness on the defensive end last year versus the previous year. Like, the previous year was like, oh, we got to figure out offense. The offense isn't really clicking. The defense is keeping us in games, but you kind of knew why they were who they were, and Isaiah wasn't even a starter. Then Isaiah becomes the starter. The offense improves, but defensively they take a major significant drop-off. Well, now in this league, they talk about it being a make or miss league, right? I think offense is really that much more important at the beginning of the year for not faltering, and having 2 scorers I think gets them through unless Isaiah is not 100% or not healthy and not playing games. If that winds up rearing its ugly head as a potential start to the season, yeah, I definitely see them sputtering again. But if Isaiah is 100% to start the year, I just don't think they're going to go through that lull like they do. I don't think it's going to be as difficult for them to figure out how to score the basket, which is really where they faltered when they're like this 500 team through the first 20 games.
Well, I think that there's a couple things. One, Hayward's emergence will allow the team to be better balanced when IT's not on the floor. So whether he's not there or is there, there should be, for as close to 45, let's say 40 to 45 minutes a night, you're going to have an all-star on the court who can score in multiple ways, who can pass, who can do a lot of things and facilitate. So there's a couple of different things going on. The problem it comes in those 5 to 8 minutes when those two aren't sharing the floor, because I'm not confident at this point that a Rozier, Smart, Brown, Tatum, Morris, Baines lineup is going to get it done. That's where I worry, because it's putting a lot of pressure on guys who, as a unit, certainly have never done it before, but also are quite young and could be victimized a bit. They're going to be playing against more experienced lineups every single night. The Celtics probably will have one of the most, if not the youngest, one of the youngest franchise teams based upon age of players in the whole league. Just based on the fact that they're going to have 6 rookies on the roster. 6 of the 15 are going to be rookies. Never mind the two-way players that they could sign. So I think you're going to see a really strong reliance on some of their veterans early on until those youth. We're going to need a big jump for Marcus Smart, for example. Marcus Smart is probably the most underrated player that needs to take a leap in this season, because he's the guy that has to settle everybody down, get them in their spots, and run what they need to run. And so so much is going to be based on what he can do. I find it interesting that Brad was talking during Summer League about how Jay Larranaga is down in Miami working with Marcus on his shot. Marcus isn't from Miami. Marcus lives in Dallas. So he's in Miami where Larranaga and Larranaga's dad, who was the coach at Miami, I just thought that was interesting. It almost seemed like Marcus was going to Jay to get that work in. So I was pretty happy to hear that. He's done those things before. Scott Morrison, the former Red Claws coach, now is going to be on the bench in the Celtics. He'd done some work with Marcus last summer. But hopefully this is a sign of just Marcus trying to continue to improve that shot, trying to find ways to get some ways that he can be a threat out there, because that's going to be so important for this team.
I'll tell you what,
up.
This is why I see Jaylen Brown as the starter unless they go Baines. No, just follow me.
Check.
Do we? Yeah, you're right. There we go. That's 4.
We had crossed that one off.
Yep.
We had done that one.
Get ready. Okay, so listen. This is why. Because, well, I know you and I talked off air before we came on, so there's the whole Baines thing, and maybe he starts in the Amir Johnson role, and maybe that's really placating / satisfying Al Horford's need to be at the 4 and not the 5. I really don't think he cares. Not in this positionless game. That's why I think the way that Brad's positioning it is part of his sell to Al Horford. You know, you got a ball handler, you got a big, you got a wing. That's it. That's how it is. It doesn't matter how many bigs are on the floor. Nobody's a 5 in my system. You're just a big. So if Al Horford does buy into that, then I think it's easy. Baines slides out. I'm sure there'll be a couple of occasional nights when they need to slide him in because of matchups. But Brown at the 2 gives him athleticism. It puts Hayward at the 3, which I really do not like Hayward at the 2. It's not my preference. I know it's all wings, but I just think him having to be an offensive scorer and be effective with Isaiah and cover for Isaiah defensively is a huge problem. I just don't think that's setting Hayward up. It's not that he can't do it, but I think we want to see him expend as much energy on offense to be effective to get what we want out of this sighting as possible. Sliding him over to the 2 and covering up for Isaiah does not maximize offensive output for Gordon Hayward. Not my preference. Not saying he can't do it, just saying not my preference. Now, Jaylen Brown's at the 2. We've already seen him do that. And what he's being asked to do offensively is very limited, and he's going to be out there with Horford, Hayward, and Thomas. So he can really just spot up corner 3, play the defense, earn his minutes, and use that length so that he still have all that flexibility to switch on defense, which is awesome. Now here's where it gets to your point. You bring in Marcus Smart. If Marcus Smart can at least just be the facilitator that he was last year, right? Just be the facilitator. He comes in, Hayward goes to the bench, or Isaiah, doesn't matter, but it's always Marcus and Hayward or Marcus and Isaiah out on the floor. He can come in, he can cover that defensive assignment, he sets up the offense and Isaiah works off ball. Or then he goes back, he's the one, he's the ball handler still, but he's getting Hayward into the right spots. Mm-hmm. We're still not asking Marcus Smart to be the second unit scorer. And if the team does a great job and they build one of those big leads, then they can really reduce minutes. Hayward and Isaiah can sit on the bench, and they can start experimenting with Tatum and Marcus Smart and some of these other younger players because they've built up a lead. The problem that they've had on that second unit is the scoring droughts. And the scoring droughts are completely related to the fact that Isaiah Thomas comes off the floor. Now that you have the ability to steady that, Marcus Smart can, instead of trying to force himself to be a scorer, he can still be a facilitator. And that transition may allow them to sustain their kind of early offensive runs and build some of these rookie player confidences up. And then when you rotate, let's say the first substitute, it won't be, but let's say the first substitute, or it might be because the fourth quarter minutes, there was a really great article, I can't remember who wrote it, about fourth quarter minutes impact. But if you figure Smart comes in for Thomas on the early sub and Jaylen Brown stays in there and then Hayward, when Thomas comes back and Hayward goes out, Brown just can slide over to the 2 while slide over to the 3 while Smart plays the ball handler and Isaiah plays off ball. Like that rotation to me is a fluid rotation for all those guys. Then you have the Jay Crowder, Marcus Morris, and Al Horford kind of rotation with maybe a Baines here and there, maybe a Semi-Ujale again if they wind up getting, things going well enough where they can afford some of those guys minutes. But that's what I think the bigs rotation is. It's Morris, Crowder, and Horford, and they're primarily going small and working Baines in on matchups.
One thing that they had said, that Brad had said when he was interviewed kind of post the signing being made official, thank God finally, was that we talked about how Gordon can facilitate the offense. He can take a lot of that pressure off IT, when he's on the court, and IT's off, but also how he can guard 1 through 4. Which I thought was a really interesting thing. That's one thing we're hearing from Brad a lot. This guy can guard 1 through 4. This guy can guard 1 through 4. We've got Jalen's working on guarding 1s and 2s. We said the same really about Jason Tatum. So it's amazing to see all these things kind of lining up about how we need to guard 1 through 4. No one's talking about 5.
And
except for Shimmy.
And look at Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown's guarding one. Like, they've put him on the 1 in summer league just to see. I mean, to me, that's so much foreshadowing. Just to emphasize your point. And you were about to go to Shemi, which I think this is a natural transition to summer league wrap up before we get to the midpoint in the show. So let's just take that Shemi and roll right into summer league, Jordan Mickey cut, Jackson cut, and all of that. But you're right. And I listened to Danny LaRue's interview with Larry H. Russell on Celtics Beat, and it was interesting. He and, I'm sorry, the other guest escapes me right now for some reason, but, they didn't seem as, Aldridge.
Yeah.
They didn't seem as high on Tatum as like the Jeff Goodmans and everybody else. And Danny was almost like above and beyond, like, I am in the Shemi Ujale camp. Mm. And there's definitely a Draymond comparison there for sure. I mean, he is 240 pounds.
He is, and he's got the strength that Draymond has. You know, he's got the ability to muscle with the biggest of the big. You know, and he was guarding Zubac in that, and he's a prototypical big 7-footer, you know, the type of guy you're going to see out there. One thing that Danny mentioned was the concern that, you know, not being able to recover for the fact that now, Kelly Olynyk's gone. Well, it's funny because on the one hand, you're right. In a traditional sense, you don't have another big guy who can do a lot of different things in the same way that Kelly did. But I think what we're seeing with this roster construction, is that we had a team that was balanced probably more traditionally in terms of bigs, the number of bigs on the roster, traditionally sized bigs, some wings, not as many, and a lot of guards. Now we have a team with few guards, a few bigs, and a lot of wings, which is really what the game is. The question is whether or not Brad employs that type of strategy. If he goes small ball a lot, which I think we all agree that he will, and maybe that's what he ends up doing for his starting lineup, he really ends up using a wing as the 4. So Crowder, you could argue Morris is in that group, maybe even Tatum. You know, if that's where the way the roster is constructed now is reflective of the way that the team will play and be used, which you'd hope that would be the case. You're going to see guys like Shimmy play the 5. You're going to see Crowder, who played the 5 at times in the playoffs. You know, the idea of Horford being upset because he's not able to, kind of step back from the 5 position. It's just, listen, this is the roster we have. You're our center. End of story. I don't know where he fits in on that. He doesn't
have to play like a traditional center because
no one does.
They run the off, right.
No one does.
Right. Atlanta did, and they definitely tried to force him into that.
Right.
But that's not the way the game is played anymore. That's not the way he needs to play. And unfortunately, it's almost like if it is in his head anymore, and I really don't think it is. I think he's so beyond that. I think he's a selfless team player, and I think he really bought into what the Celtics were doing from the start. I'm not saying that maybe if there was going to be a 5 and they were going to play that way just based on personnel in years past, that for political reasons, like you and I have talked about, that Amir Johnson was the starter at the 5. I think some of it was just continuity. Some of it was who finishes the game. But one thing, despite the fact that there are 6 players on this roster that are rookies, they've never had this much wing depth. The amount of, they shifted from guard depth to wing depth this offseason. Mm-hmm. And that allows them to, I guess, come full circle on any kind of strategy commitment to Al Horford about him not playing like a traditional center in any lineup combinations.
No, I think that's true. I think you do have Aaron Baines available when you need that backup. I think that we're going to see that Zizic is going to be more of an option than the naysayers were saying a week ago, who I think a lot of people were writing him off and saying, well, clearly the guy can't play. We saw the more and more he played, the more and more he showed exactly what we thought he could be.
Actually, adjustments are such a big key. And Danny made a really good point in that interview with Larry H. Russell as well, that setting, he didn't expect anything out of Zizic that was really going to be overwhelming because the setting of Summer League doesn't showcase big men the way that you might in the NBA. This is the thing we don't know that we will find out about Zizic, and it'll have a lot to do with whether or not he plays, is how tough can he be against some of the muscly guys in the league. He seems to have the ability to put the ball on the floor, and he seems pretty mobile, but if he can't also be physical, then he's going to wind up losing the minutes to small ball guys until he's able to pack on that strength and really, and he looks strong, but you just never know until you've really got to drop that weight, put your back to the basket, and box somebody out. Because if he's not grabbing boards, they're probably rather going to have somebody who can move off the ball, switch a little bit easier on the smaller guys, the 1-4 statement, and drop the ball in the bucket from the outside and space the floor. That's where I think they'll go. If to be a big, you've at least got to gobble up some rebounds, even though Amir Johnson didn't do it.
Well, and we saw, I mean, even before, not this past season, but the season before, Sullinger was getting a lot of minutes because he was able to be productive and get rebounds in small ball lineups as the only five. So if Sullinger can get those minutes, you're damn sure Zizic can get those minutes. He's showing himself to be a decent passer, a good reading of the floor. He's not a guy who's going to play above the rim. That's going to be an issue for him. But look, that's something that we're going to see, that they're going to conditioning, whether it's Tatum or those are guys that are going to be, really working hard this summer, to prepare. But I think the Summer League was a wild success for the Celtics. Huge smashing success. Tatum was amazing. And, the question is going to be whether or not he gets enough minutes really to reflect how well he's played and how much promise he shows.
That comes down to shot selection. They're going to want to make an impression on Jason right out of the gate to get that shot. They're going to tell him, we love the fact that you can make those, and if you got to Evan Turner us every once in a while in a pinch, we get it, and we're glad you can do it, but let's start carving out the right spots on the floor for you so that we don't have to worry about you hitting all of these tough shots. There will be moments when you have to be creative. There will be times when we're going to count on you to do that. Your rookie season isn't going to be one of them, and the truth is, for you to be effective, you've got to figure out, how to use that step back how to set the step back up. That's what I mean to say. Instead of, if the step back doesn't work or the first option, to drive before you go to that move, if you've only got those two and then everything else is crazy creative and you're just really long and you can get your shot off against anybody, that's great. But having said that, you need to learn how to set up your most effective shots, the killers. And I think that's where they're going to want him to go. Shot selection, right places on the floor, how to put together an offensive package so that he can get there more often.
And I think that's it. It's interesting because how many star wings have we seen in this new 3 or layup era who have been kind of mid-range focus? We haven't seen a lot of those guys who have come out of the draft. I suppose, Ingram could be one of those guys, maybe Jabari, who had a real rough adjustment with the knee. Wiggins really wasn't that type of player. There haven't been a lot of guys who fit that model, and so it's a real interesting case study because I'm not sure who the good comp is. I myself would love to see them try to get, allow him to be himself in the mid-range a little bit, because if you can hit those shots at a high percentage, they're not a bad shot. The problem is that if that's all you're taking, and you saw him at times kind of pump faking his way or hesitating his way out of threes, or instead of taking it all the way to the rim. So it'll be interesting to see what type of decisions that the Celtics make. They certainly weren't hesitant to give, as you said, Evan Turner those shots. So will they give those shots if they're hit for a high enough percentage and he's the offense you need in that second unit? Perhaps, Brad is a little bit more willing to go with those things when you're just damn good, as Jason Tatum very well shows he could be.
Yeah, it would be nice if they could get some of those big leads and really let Jason get some work with that second unit and give the other guys some rest, because that's really, they don't need the second unit to play a ton of defense. They need the second unit to continue to score points so they don't start making early subs and bringing starters back in because they're afraid they're going to let the game slip away. And they haven't really had good scoring off the bench, and Evan Turner was like the big stopgap. So, hey, this is going to wrap up the first half of the show. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about Summer League because we haven't gotten to Jordan Mickey yet. We haven't talked about Jackson getting cut and how he's being stretched. We also need to talk about some of the new rules that came down, including timing around the trade deadline and changes to timeouts in the final minutes of the game. And we haven't talked about the training facility and how Gordon Hayward was not only brought to Fenway Park, but to that training facility, and the fact that that training staff has had significant changes in just the last 10 days with Brian Dew and Ed Lacerte moving on as the team transitions to the new facility a lot closer to the stadium in Boston versus out in Waltham. So real quick, it's the off season and teams are finalizing their rosters for next year. Having the right players on the court will be the key to success. That sharp outside shooter or power rebounder can be the difference between winning and losing. Business isn't any different. Your company needs the right people to be the best. You know, guys that don't have to play the five, guys that just know a big is a big. So where do you go to find top talent? You can't find the best candidates by posting your job on just one site. You need to post on all the top job sites, and now you can with ZipRecruiter. At ZipRecruiter.com, you can post your job to 100 plus job sites with just one click. Then their powerful technology efficiently matches the right people to your position. That's why ZipRecruiter is different. Unlike other job sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them for you. In fact, over 80% of jobs posted on ZipRecruiter get a qualified candidate in just 27 hours. No more juggling emails or calls into the office. Simply screen, rate, and manage candidates all in one place with ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use dashboard. Find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by businesses of all sizes nationwide. And right now, our listeners can start forming their own winning team on ZipRecruiter for free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/sportsfan. That's ZipRecruiter.com/sportsfan. Try it today for free at ZipRecruiter.com/sportsfan. So let's just finish up this conversation about Summer League. Specifically, Jordan Mickey, we say goodbye to him. Last year, we said goodbye to R.J. Hunter a lot later. The decisions weren't really made until training camp. This one gets made soon, and then another one gets made, I'd say rather quickly, considering the guard moving, like we just talked about. They were guard heavy, now they're wing heavy, and they make this cut with Demetrius Jackson, and very soon after, even though he's stretched, very soon after, Paul Pierce gets signed so that he can retire as a Celtic. So Jordan Mickey, a guy, I think, the book was really written on him after the second season, where we all started to hear things from a lot of different sources where, yes, he's lighting up the D-League. They're just not seeing the alpha dog level confidence in the pros and not sure he's going to make that leap. Lots of talent and just not a shooter, right? Like we saw in D-League that he was shooting the ball and stroking it and scoring like double machine and etc. But when he would come up to the parent club, it wasn't the same. And I don't know if it's because defenders were altering his shot, or if it was confidence because now the lights were on, the pressure was on, or what exactly it was. But whatever he did in the D-League, and this isn't that uncommon. We're not trying to make this out like it's only Jordan Mickey. There are plenty of players that light it up in the D-League that then don't translate. Of course, you can also look at stories like Tim Frazier out of Penn State, totally undersized guard, lights it up in the D-League, and then winds up getting an opportunity to start, I believe, with the Pelicans last season. Yeah. Am I right on that? Was the Pelicans, correct?
Yeah, Pelicans. Yep.
Yeah,
yep.
So there are stories where that happens. Maybe some of this is the positionless league that it's become. Maybe this is a guy that were it 10 years ago, winds up coming up to the parent club and kind of finds his way in that emerging small ball 5 position. I'm not really sure. It's hard to write the book on that, but he dominated D-League, Now he's gone, and a lot of signs pointed to confidence when he came up to the parent club.
Yeah, Mickey had a great run, particularly his first summer league. I think there was a chance that he may not have gotten signed even that first season. They were in need of rookies, and I think he filled a role. But, the fact that a guy with his skills couldn't find time in Boston says a lot more about Mickey than it does about Boston, I think. He had ample opportunities. He had time in the D-League. He came up. He'd have stints. And then he wouldn't put it together. And,
I
think
mind,
that's
this is a second-round pick. And it was one of the first times that they had done that 4-year deal for a second rounder. Mm-hmm. They really foster great relationships, I think, with the agents in doing that, because the players do make a little bit more money. And they even gave him that, I think maybe the CBA had changed a little bit with the second round picks, and they could get more money, and they weren't slotted in. Like, it had kind of changed, and the Celtics were taking advantage of that to some degree, and they gave him, to your point, ample opportunity to be successful. But with those second round picks, you're really just trying to figure out, do we have a home run here? Do we have a guy that just should never have gone to the second round or not? Because the rate of return on, I'd say rotation players or, borderline star players or steady starters that are getting picked out of the second round, and Isaiah Thomas being one of the great examples of that. Tim Frazier being an undrafted example of that, only more on that outside of the rotation kind of hit. This second round pick is a gamble. I think teams figure out, or at least the Celtics have decided that they can figure out very quickly if that second round pick is a hit or not. And even for the first round pick, some of that falls into place with a guy like RJ Hunter. Yep, you know what? I just don't think we quite hit on that late. Was he in the 20s? Was he 21,
27,
20?
No,
that's right. He was 28. They had two in the 20s that year, and he was the second one, right? I think something along those lines. But either way, he's almost a second round pick, and they figure out pretty quickly. The players they might still be a decent player, but they're not a franchise altering player. This is a player that for the next 5, we're not going to worry about missing out on the next Isaiah Thomas with this guy. We already know that. And on top of the fact that we've already identified that with this particular player, as far as this club's concerned in the next 5 years, we can get somebody on the mid-level exception or something along those lines that'll easily replace their value on the roster. Like, they're replaceable. So gamble, and move on quickly,
Well, yeah, and it was a non-guaranteed deal. It's an easy place to cut from. I think, Demetrius Jackson was a harder cut than Mickey, because he did have some guarantees money in there. And also because I think he had shown more in the last 2 summer leagues, honestly. I thought Demetrius Jackson had a good summer league last year. He had a decent year up in Portland with the Red Claws, and seemed to show a little bit I thought, in summer league. Really the only one who kind of settled the team down.
Without him. I mean, he really made a huge difference. Yeah. And I even tweeted out, I said, I'm really liking what I'm seeing from Jackson in the summer league. How come nobody's talking about him? Is there something I'm missing? And you tweeted back turnovers, and sure, that's an issue, but he was pretty much the only guard on the roster. Like, the ball handling responsibilities were huge on him. So I had no problems giving him a slide on that. Here's the thing about Jackson, and you and I talked about it at the break before we started back up. What do you think about the possibility that there's kind of an arrangement with that if he doesn't land somewhere else, that they'll pick him back up when they finish doing what they're doing with Paul Pierce?
I don't think so. I think because the only room they have for him is a 2-way, or they're going to cut a player that they've just signed, Nader or let's say Shimmy. They're not going to cut guaranteed money, to sign him. So you're looking at one of the 2-way slots. So Jabari, Bird, and then you've got Kadeem Allen. I mean, those are.
Bird seems like an obvious 2-way player. I think he played well, but it's a toss-up for me between Kadeem Allen and Jackson, and that toss-up in my court falls to Jackson.
What we don't know right now is whether or not the 2-way deals are appetizing enough for a player who may not be able to, who may be able to get a deal somewhere else, like overseas. So let's say, I could get a deal in the, in the Spanish league. They're clearly going to get more than $75,000 a year. You know what I mean? So you've got to wonder how appetizing that is. You've got to really be on the fringe. Having said that, though, you do make more than 75 if you're called up. So let's say Bird, gets 75 at the minimum, but there's injuries. You call Bird up to fill out the Celtics roster. Well, now he's getting NBA minimum money for that, which certainly quickly makes that more than 75 grand. So maybe it is a better long run pick. I just don't think for Jackson, I've got to believe there's got to be a spot for him somewhere, on a 50-man roster, I would think.
This two-way contract is another opportunity for the Celtics to build strong relationships with agents. And what I mean by that is, like you said earlier, there are 6 rookies out of 15 players on this roster today. So easy to make a spot for a couple of these two-way guys to come up and make more money than their actual contract and send a guy down who's not getting run. Let's say it's Semi Ojeleye. Send him down, bring Bird up. Just think about that. In terms of the money, it's such a small drop in the bucket for the Celtics if it gains them favor with agents. And don't think that Brad Stevens was the only relationship that mattered in Gordon Hayward's decision, because Gordon's agent has had a long-standing relationship with Danny Ainge, and that's how those relationships are fostered. So with that in mind, this two-way thing, if a team is willing to spend money, and really we're only talking about drops in the bucket more money, and that just puts a little cachet for somebody who's a higher profile. To your point, if any one of those 3 guys is going to make more money overseas, they're probably out of here, right? Especially if they don't think they can get called up. But if Danny Ainge and the Celtics basically say to somebody, listen, we really want Jackson here. His spot on our team is totally insurance. We'll give him a two-way deal, but off the record, I can't make the commitment. It really kind of depends, blah, blah, blah. The truth is we'll get it. We can pretty much guarantee you that we'll call him up for enough games that we will outpace that overseas contract for Jackson this year. And as long as they come through on that, that's a ton of goodwill, because these players, the only reason they're going overseas is for more money. It's not the competition. It's not, I get to see the world. They'd much rather be stateside. They'd much rather be near their families. And if the money were equal, they'd play in the D-League. They really would. This is a great opportunity to keep some of that talent stateside.
And to that point, let's remember we've got our starting point guard has got a hip condition that hasn't yet been cleared. So very quickly you could go from cut to backup point guard. Because,
that crazy?
Marcus moves up, and then who's gonna play that?
Rozier's an off the ball guy. He's not a ball handler. They need a guy who can handle the ball, and you could play Rozier. And in that, you see Jalen has been handling the ball, and we know he could run the offense through Horford and Hayward, and they could make do. But you would think they would still want some insurance if they really needed, a player to push the tempo and set up the offense in a more traditional way. They're going to want somebody out there. Otherwise, they can't show other teams that look. Then that decreases their ability to throw something else at the opponent, especially the opponent's second unit. It's not like he's going to be out there with the starters going up against the starters to just, hey, look, if something's not working against the other team's second unit, you want to be able to give them what will work. And without Jackson, you may not have that.
That's true. I think so. Just to move on from Jackson and Hunt and whatever his face name is, Jordan Mickey.
Were you going to do Brandon Hunter on that? I think you were thinking Brandon Hunter, right?
Maybe. I don't know.
RJ Hunter or Brandon Hunter?
Gone.
You mushed them together.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Happy trails. I think Shimmy has a chance to be a rotation player. I think that's legit. I don't in the same way I thought Jordan Mickey was going to be a rotation player, I think Shimmy could absolutely be a rotation player. I think there's nights when he's going to get more minutes than Jason Tatum.
Older player, high release, clean, quick release. And he only has to do 3-and-D. That's it. If he can guard multiple positions and he has the cojones to knock down an open three, he'll find his way in some spot minutes for sure.
He can defend, let's say 2 through 5. And I can see that guy being somebody who's easy to throw in there and get something.
He's got a little Gershon Yabusele kind of thing to him, except a little bit wider diversity in terms of positions, right? I don't think Gershon's going to guard twos, right? But
no.
But he's also a little bit better, I think, at maybe attacking the basket. Whereas it's pretty obvious that Ujale is, if his 3-ball doesn't drop, he's going to lose those rotation minutes fast.
Yeah, I think Gershon is a little bit more of a complete product, offensively, better passer. I think those things will play themselves out. But that's just the crazy thing about this. Honestly, this could be the most fascinating, abbreviated though, preseason, because it's a smaller preseason. The season starts 2 weeks earlier. It's a shorter preseason. So the opportunity for Brad to kind of figure out his rotation early on is going to be really hard. And he's got a lot of rookies to do that with. So it's going to be really hard to see. It would be interesting to see how he puts this together with so many guys.
Though. He will be able, now I don't think the starters are going to be doing a whole ton more practice necessarily, but these young guys could get a ton of extra reps in versus a normal season for that same reason. And that might actually be a lot more beneficial. Sometimes I think people would think, oh yeah, the training camp, they need that. Well, not if they're not really playing minutes after training camp closes, right? It's more getting them to watch film, getting them to learn how to watch film, and then apply that. And the minutes that they play after they watch film and practice is still pretty limited. You're just adding one little thing. Don't forget to do this, or you're getting killed this way. I think having some practice time for that to become like the whole muscle memory concept and everything else, those changes could really help out the dearth of young players on this roster as well, just because the starters may do like an abbreviated practice when they do it, but it just helps the young players kind of see it, role model it, what it takes, but then they kind of cut the starters short. And then those 6 rooks are out there, grinding on a much heavier practice because their rotation minutes are going to be reduced.
That's true. No, that's true. Hey, listen, I want to jump to the issue with the training staff.
Yep, let's do it.
I know we've talked quite a bit about this, but because this is a pivotal summer for those kids. The Yabuselis, it's his first summer over here. Zizic is his first summer over here. Tatum, Ojale, Kadeem Allen, Jabari Bird. They got 6 guys there who have never played in the NBA, have never had a summer to prepare for 82 game schedule, who've had to prepare to potentially be rotation pieces in a team that's going to go to the Eastern Conference Finals, or could go to the Eastern Conference Finals. And in the middle of that, the Celtics make the decision that they are going to change their entire strategy in terms of training and conditioning, and decide they're going to go out and go take a much more of a sports science of a focus on much more intensive on the sports science aspect of things, and in doing so cause their longtime 14-year strength and conditioning coach Brian Dew to walk away, and then say goodbye to their over 30-year trainer Ed Lacerte. This is a big deal. This is a really, really, really big deal. And the fact that I'm not saying that they're going to be bad or good as a result of this. I think we still don't know. We know what we're losing. We don't know yet what we're getting. But it's a big deal. I mean, for almost as long as I've been a Celtics fan, Ed Lacerte has been the trainer of this team. He's outlasted Jimmy Rogers, Chris Ford, ML Carr, Rick Pitino, Jim O'Brien, John Connor, I guess you could call, Doc Rivers, And now here we have Brad Stevens, 8 coaches who've been here, and Ed Lacerte's been here through all of them, and he's going bye-bye. And that's a big change. And though Dew was apparently, he was willing to walk away, it seemed like Lacerte was the one who was probably pushed.
Yeah, it does seem that way. It seems like Brian did kind of walk away. Sean Grandy tweeted out, basically we lost a friend. There was a lot of love in that locker room for Brian Dew. Now, despite the fact that Ed is well respected, I thought John Corrales put it best on the blog the day that this was all announced, that even the common casual fan seems to know who Ed Lacerte is, and that's true. But Brian Dew seemed to be the more beloved the way that the news came out. Just the way everybody around the organization handled it. It was question marks around a 30-year training vet, and Ed had, one of the, very renowned trainer, one of the most respected trainers in the industry. It obviously points to some sort of a business relationship in the arrangements in opening the new training facility. And some of it may be just, as you point out, a move towards more modern sort of training fundamentals and theories. So that's where the Ed Lacerte one makes sense. The Brian Dew one is curious, and you wonder if maybe the Ed decision had actually already been made. And Brian decided there's a changing of the guard, and I'm not.
I don't want.
And right, and I already know I'm not the alpha dog, even though everybody loves me. Or it's the right time because I've already got all these other business. My business is rolling now. People know me. I can thrive on my own. It's time to spread my wings. My loyalty is now broken, not to the organization, but to the training staff as a team. I'm going to have less control, and here I have my own business anyway. Why don't I just go build that and have control and see what I'm made of? These guys don't get there if they're not competitors. Seems like a good time for him to just go ahead and compete in the business world and see what he can do. The other interesting thing, though, in all of this move, and former co-host of ours, JB, would be jumping up and down right now saying, wait a second, what about Doc McKean? Right? Because he used to think that the doctor, not the brain doctor, but the actual team doctor, not the Nagel, the actual team doctor had a lot to do with injuries, being mismanaged, like missing bone spurs. I believe that was Al Jefferson's ankle, and having a lot of concerns about the medical staff.
Bone on bone.
Bone on bone. That's right. Thank you, Gary Tangway and Wally Zerbiak, for putting us on the map. That hit USA Today. Remember that? Bone on bone. It did. Celtic Stuff Live gets to USA Today. On a throwaway comment from Tommy Heinsohn, no less, that Gary just regurgitated. But that's a whole other awesome story that probably only our long-term listeners like Lance G will remember. But Doc McKean, this is the one I'm actually keeping my eye on. Is he going to stick around with this organization, or is he sort of more of a subtle in the background? Because the training facility really has I don't want to say nothing to do with the medical staff. It has something to do with the medical staff. But the medical staff relationship has a lot more to do with sponsorships from, people, I can't remember where he's from because I don't get the CSN any broadcasts anymore, but the hospital that sponsors the Celtics that you see all the time during the television broadcast, I'm pretty sure Doc McKean is from there. So you got to
Baptist.
Yeah, there we go. Look it up. See if Dr. McKean is at New England Baptist.
He is.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, that's where he is. Yeah.
Yep. So there's some relationship there. Maybe he doesn't move, but it will be interesting to see if this becomes an overall medical and training revamping, or if it really does just stay solely with the training staff. Because, as far as the team doctor goes, I think that would be very quiet. If there was a change in that aspect, it would be very, very quiet.
So New England Baptist has been the official hospital of the Boston Celtics for 30 years.
Oh, that sounds a lot like Ed Lacerte's tenure.
We'll see.
Pretty interesting, huh?
Let's just put that aside and,
let's just document that we put a timestamp for our listeners that, we talked about this. We thought about this.
We did.
And we'll see what happens.
And you look at the Patriots, they've done a deal with Beth Israel Deaconess and the Red Sox. As you said, it's a sponsorship opportunity. And with this new training facility, Celtics are looking for ways to monetize. They're looking at ways to make some cash. And if we're going to be in an opportunity where we need to pay the luxury tax for 3 max players or 3 near max players, depending on what happens with Isaiah next season,
you put a GE on the front of the jersey is what you do. And
exactly,
they did not hold out like the rest of the NBA or like they did with the cheerleaders. They're kind of coming in with everybody on this one. But to your point, if you're going to pay for these players and you're going to hopefully shell out the money on a Marcus Smart extension before the season's underway, and you're going to keep Isaiah Thomas on this roster at the end of next year, that is going to require some serious extra capital to keep this competitive product out on the floor. They're going to get hit hard with luxury tax. And so you're right. They got to find a way to fund it. And it was interesting watching Paul Pierce sign that contract with a jersey with the GE logo right on the front for the first time we've seen it. There you go. First time we've seen it. So I think that's going to upset some people more than it upsets me. I understand it's a business. But I know the purists, and I'll probably get hammered on this. We'll watch the YouTube comments tomorrow. Well, what do you know? What do you know? They'll slam me. I'm sure of it, but
just you. Just you though.
Right. Cause everybody else is going to back off that. They're going to be like, no, this is the worst thing that ever happened to a Celtics jersey. Yeah. And listen, I get it. It just doesn't bother me as much as it bothers other people. There are some things that bother me, and, flopping is something that bothers me. Fouls or the way that the end of a game gets so drug out, like we talked with Mike Gorman about, those things bother me. A GE logo on the front of a t-shirt, if that's what helps us, keep the best possible product on the floor for the Boston Celtics, I'm fine with it.
Yeah. I mean, look at soccer jerseys. I mean, what they sell with the soccer jersey is not the little crest up in the corner. The GE logo is as big as the logo of soccer teams are. And the big logo, which is where Celtics is on our jersey, is, it's Qatari Airlines and, Bet.us or whoever. I mean, it's
totally inverted because that's what it takes to make money based on the popularity of that sport versus basketball. And purists will say, well, basketball is good enough, right? America. All right, let's talk about the rule changes then. We've talked about that. This is the last topic we really need to hit before we close the show. The rule changes, and I did just allude to it when I talked about how drug out the end of games can be. But 2 big pieces with the new rules. One is the trade deadline comes before the All-Star break, which I actually really like because I think the players need to have more time on the rosters if you're going to make a deal and really make a postseason run. Delaying that, I think, even if you look at trying to trade for a guy like Paul George last season at the trade deadline, if that was a little bit earlier, you can almost see yourself giving up a little bit more assets to rent them because you've got more time to get them into your system. Think about how many times Danny Ainge has tried to make that earlier trade, even that Rajon Rondo trade, way before the deadline. I think if something comes his way that makes sense, he'd prefer to do it sooner than later, and I think most teams would. And it's not so early in the season that teams don't know where they're headed. Everybody's got a pretty good idea of where they're at, what their goals are, what they're capable of, and everybody who says in the off season we're not quite ready to commit to tanking because we need to put some fans in the seats to start out the season to hit our numbers. Now, a team that they may be trading their all-star to is going to get a little bit more value out of that. And when they go to the trade, and then when they go to the all-star game, they're representing the team that they're going to finish the season with, which is great. And then we have 7 timeouts, all 75 seconds equal, We'll talk about that one second. Your thoughts on the trade deadline, John?
I think the trade deadline thing is great. I do like it around the All-Star break. I think it makes a lot of sense. It fills the airspace around the fact that there's no games, there's nothing else. There's a lot of hanging out and, going to Cabo or Mexico in the case of Rajon Rondo a couple of years back, or maybe not. I think that that's just a better thing to do. So moving it back, if it helps to create more movement on the trade market, I'm for it. I don't like the idea of them doing it because they were concerned that the trade talks distracted from the All-Star game. I think it makes the All-Star game even more exciting, to be honest with you. I think it makes it a better game. I think it makes more eyeballs go to it, not less. So the idea that they're somehow protecting the sanctity of the All-Star game is pretty ridiculous after the game we saw last year. So put that aside, though, for a second. I think the idea of an earlier break is good.
Just a quick side note. I'm a big fan of All-Star Weekend in any sport. I'm just not into it. It bores the absolute crap out of me. And the dunk contest was entertaining, and I think we did have a blip on the radar with Zach LaVine. But for the most part, it's a yawner for me. But anyway, little asterisk there. Pretty soon that'll be a checkboxer, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah. So the next thing I think I would, but going on to the timeouts. I think the timeouts, I like it. I like half of it. I like getting rid of the early in quarter timeouts. I think it's ridiculous that there's an under 9-minute timeout. What the hell is the point of that? That's ridiculous. I mean, come on. You're 3 minutes into the game. We need a break. No. That's after just being at, in between the quarter breaks. So to me, the early parts of the quarter, you need a flow to it. The latter part of the quarter, or the half, or I guess the game, that's a point where you should be doing everything you possibly can to win the game. And so losing one timeout out of that situation, I don't know. I mean,
I thought it was two. I thought it went from 9 to 7 because if you, I understand there were 20-second timeouts,
per half,
but
I'm talking about.
Per half. Yep.
Per half, you saw Brad take a situation where he was able to drop game-winning, out of timeouts, ATO situations, and score on 3 straight possessions to beat Cleveland, right? Or was it Washington? I can't remember which game it was that he did. I think it was the Cleveland game.
I thought it was Washington, actually.
Oh, was it Washington? Was it game 7? No. It was earlier in the series.
It was 5.
It was game 5. Yes, it was game 5. Thank you. So, to me, that's like, I like anything that helps Brad Stevens to get an advantage over the teams he's playing against. The other thing, though, about that, Celtics actually have a talented team now. The Celtics' overall talent is better situated. So, you'd had to use more of the coaching prowess to be able to put yourself over the top. Now, I'm a little bit more confident in the Celtics' ability to simply just play the game and be better than having to use the genius that they have on the sidelines to overcome that on, I guess, 2 possessions per game. I think their margin of error is much bigger now. So I like it. Overall, I like it, but and the fact that Brad Stevens likes it makes me think, okay, this is a good thing. But
Brad Stevens wasn't going to say anything else. He wasn't going to say anything else except that he likes it. The part that Adam Silver said that I completely agree with was that they were trying to improve the pace and flow of the game, speed it up a little bit. If you look at other sports, they just don't drag it out the way that the NBA drags out the end, and it's still going to happen because if you really look at all these reviews that are happening, they've already taken the place of these timeouts. We could take out another 2 timeouts, and we're basically handing these teams extra timeouts because we have to review every freaking foot position and play. And I get it, we have to do it, but it's almost negated the need to call a timeout at the end of the game. You need 3.5 for your final 2 minutes, and that's pretty much it. They'll review everything else for you, and I know I'm being a little over the top, but you get my point.
A little bit.
You get my point, though. It's so drug out, Most teams get a timeout every time a play happens in the final 2 minutes because it's so crucial every time. It's instant replay, and so the timeouts, you get plenty of time to draw up that strategy or prepare for what happens after review when you get the ball back. Instead of just, we go to review, we wait 5 minutes, they shoot the free throws, then they call timeout, we wait another 90 seconds, now it'll be 75, wait another 90 seconds, then they do their play, right? And then there's another timeout. Like, it's insane. And every time there's even a close call, there's another 5 minutes of review. Oh, we're gonna go to Secaucus and take a look at the video. And then Mike Gorman goes, and this was the thing in his interview with us earlier in the season, I thought he made a fantastic point. He said, look, he goes, my whole strategy is, it's different than radio. It's TV. I don't need to be the show. I don't have to talk the entire time. My job is to just fill in around what people can see with their own eyes. Now he's got 5 minutes of dead air that he's got to fill with whatever, statistics, conversation, and he does a fantastic job. It's the reason he's an award winner. But that's just too much damn time. Even me at home, I've caught myself snoozing during those 5-minute reviews because I'm an old man now and it's 10 o'clock at night and I'm waiting for the game to end, and it loses so much of its gusto. So I'm glad about this. The part that really closed me was that the 20-second timeout was lasting 60 seconds anyway. I guess I inherently knew that, but I never really thought about it. So when they said they took the 90-second ones down to 75 and then took the 60-second ones, which, I mean, really, what's the difference? Combine them and drop 2? Yeah. It's a step in the right direction. Let's see how it goes. I'd be for taking one more timeout away, actually. Or keep the 7, but shorten them down to 60 seconds, and let's do something about these reviews. Let's just get quicker about it.
Well, yeah, I think I would prefer that they get a better system on the review section. I mean, the idea of what things they can call in-house and what things they can't call in-house. The issue, flagrants are in-house issues, but to me, they need to straighten that up. That's a bigger issue to me.
The flagrants should come after the game. The in-call is,
yeah, but they impact the game, though.
They do, but my point is, but the nitpicking of it, that should be a judgment call. You're the ref. You're feeling the flow of the game. If somebody, it has a lot more to do with intent than semantics. So if you, after review, a flagrant 1 should have been a flagrant 2, you fine them. Right? If they didn't see it in the game, or vice versa, if it's a flagrant 2, they can downgrade it afterwards because technically speaking, it was a flagrant 1, but the officials know what's going on in that game, and intent has more meaning than slow-mo pushing you down. Like, everything looks bad in slow-mo.
Well, the big thing that changed there is they talked about you're making the downward motion. If you're not playing the ball and you're playing the body or you're trying to hit the head or, they made that call or that, I guess, read of the rules a few years ago. And ever since then, they're looking for contact to the head. It's in head and neck. I think they got to look at the flagrant foul rules to begin with, but the reason why the flagrant foul rules are what they are is because you want to penalize the team that's caused the flagrant foul in the middle of the game. If you want to say, well, we're going to suspend the player.
My point is you don't send that off-site. You let the guys in the game who are feeling the game make the call.
Fine.
And have them make it quick and get on with it, right? And then if there's a league adjustment, you do that one after the game.
But you want to make sure it's right because you don't want to impact a game with the wrong call. You don't want to kick out LeBron James when he shouldn't have been called up. Well, you don't want to kick out Isaiah Thomas for tripping somebody if he didn't do it or intentionally.
They still get these calls wrong. It doesn't matter if it takes 5 minutes. They still get them wrong. It's the humanistic side of the game. It gives it character. It gives it flavor. And that's why I say you've got to train your refs, but you've also got to empower them. This just reeks of corporate micromanagement to me.
It might, I would rather them do everything they possibly can to get the right call and get the right result than so I can get to my so I can get back to
what do you think about a time
snarky
limit?
comments on Twitter. I don't need to be able to go to bed 5 minutes earlier so that but the Celtics lose the game.
How about this? There's a time limit on it. Even if they want to go off site, they got 2 minutes to review it, and if it's not clear, it goes the lesser of the two calls. And then it just moves faster, right? So if they're not certain it's a flagrant 2, they leave it a flagrant 1, right? Or if they're not certain it's a flagrant 1, then it's just a common foul. Done.
Well, they did the conclusive thing in football, and I think that helped to speed the game up quite a bit. I think that would be one thing to look at and just say, look, like, we're going to make the call. It's a 1. If it's not conclusive within 2 minutes, then we got to move on, and we're going with the original call. So I think you're right. I think that's one way to get there for sure.
I'm down with that. I'm also down with the fact that we just had a really long show after two kind of late. Well, we had a late show the first week I did 2 weeks of vacation for the first time, and I don't even know how long. Spent a week in Maine. On a lake, spent the last week in the Outer Banks with the family. Work did creep in a little bit. We did a late show the first week, and then I think we were on time or a day late, not $1 short, but a day late last week.
Yep.
But we did have abbreviated 40-minute shows. We made up for it. This show's about an hour and 20, right around there. So a couple of bonus times. It all averages out. I'm glad we waited, though, because there were nuggets of information and updates. But this really is what I would consider to be the complete package show of all the mainstay stuff, other than the immediate announcements and, oh my God, Gordon Hayward. And we still got to kick it off with a major signing, Paul Pierce, which will be one of the first podcasts out there in the morning that will have that news coming right out of the gate. So, I think our timing has been impeccable, if not delayed.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. Impeccable, if not delayed. We're plausibly live and ready to come at you.
Plausibly live. That's that right there. That's it. Celtic stuff plausibly live.
I stole that one from Tony Kornheiser, but I think that's us now. We are Celtic stuff plausibly live, and we love it. And we're glad you're all listening with us. Tell your friends. Tell them to listen to the show. Find us on YouTube. Find us on the CLNS radio app. CLNS media app. That's, old habits, man. Old habits.
So I'm going to let the listeners in on a little secret that we've been recording video for the first time during this show.
Oh God,
so it is a precursor. You heard us talk about it on the last show. So we're getting comfortable with it. We're going to practice some production. And then I would think by August, we're going to do one of those meme faces just pasted over mine the whole time. It'd be like a bobblehead Jordan crying meme or something that just sways back and forth. But
yeah,
that'll be cool.
That plastic surgery, that's the other thing we're going to do. But anyway, yeah, a little nip, a little tuck, a little, looking like Joan Rivers by training camp. Anyway, those of you listening on YouTube, we are going to be bringing video. Everybody else who is listening on the CLNS Media app or Stitcher or iTunes, that you'll be able to go on to YouTube, or I guess Stitcher and iTunes will do the video too. I'm actually not sure. I listen to everything through the CLNS Media mobile app right now, but you will be seeing video from us in just a few short weeks. Bear with us while we continue to work on that. But you'll see our ugly mugs every week coming up pretty soon. But that's going to do it for this week. The broadcast will be available on demand on the CLNS Media mobile app. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at CSL_Justin and at CSL_Duke. A heartfelt thank you to everybody for tuning in this week. And remember that you can support the show by subscribing to Celtic Stuff Live on iTunes and Stitcher. We'd love it if you gave us a rating and a review, because your feedback is important to the show. And a quick reminder that this one was brought to you by ZipRecruiter.com. They've got a great deal for all of you listeners, but most importantly, you'd be supporting our show and the entire network. For staff writer Samuel Elias, executive producer Larry H. Russell, the founder of CLNS Media, Nick Gelso, and my co-host John Duke, I'm Justin Poulin. Thank you for listening to this week's edition of Celtic Stuff Live.
Celtic Stuff Live.